Hi, it's MP the tutor here, and today we're going to be looking at solving quadratic equations. And first of all, we're going to look at doing that by factorising. And it might be good if you're not sure on factorising, go back to 1.3. So I'll put a little card up and put something in the description, which looks at factorising first. And now we're going to look at solving. For example, you might have the word solve x squared plus 5x minus 14 equals 0. So if we go back to our horizon, first of all, they don't actually have that equals 0 bit. But what we're going to do, first of all, with this, is you're going to have your brackets and an x and an x, and we need the factors of 14, which are 1 times 14 and 2 times 7. Now, what it is the number which is here is what we times to make, and the number 5 is what we are adding to make, or minusing. So the 14 minus 14 means I have to have a plus and a minus, and that also equals 0. And one of our factor pairs will get us to 5. So, for example, this time it's 7 minus 2, so plus 7 minus 2 equals 0. These are now two separate things multiplying together. So if I had x plus 7 equals 0, I wouldn't care what this x minus 2 is, because 0 times anything is 0. And if I had x minus 2 equals 0, and then in the same way, then x plus 7 could be anything it likes, because 0 times anything is still 0. We haven't quite finished, because what we need to do is we need to get x on its own. So to get rid of this plus 7, we take away 7. So you have x equals minus 7. And here we plus 2 to get rid of the 2. So you get x equals 2. And that is our answers. Now with these quadratics, often there are two answers, occasionally one, and occasionally there aren't any answers at all. So let's do another example. Let's go for x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Well, the factors of 6, 1 times 6, and 2 times 3. So you have two brackets because it's an x squared, and then there's a number. And here we have an x and an x. And this time we need to multiply to make plus 6 and add to make minus 5. Or you're going to have basically two negatives. Go two negatives, multiply to make a positive, but add to make a negative. And then we look at our pairs and go, well, what's minus 1 minus 6? Well, that's minus 7. That doesn't work. But minus 2 minus 3 works in terms of our factors. We then have x minus 2 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Well, that means that x equals 2, or x equals 3. And you can happily have both your answers be positive like that. Sometimes both answers will be negative, some both positive, some plus and a minus. So let's have a little look at this next one. We could have something like x squared plus 8x equals 0. Now this time we don't have a number at the end. We just have x squared and we just have a certain number of x's. Sometimes people divide everything by x, and it's kind of okay-ish, but not quite. A better way is you factorize out an x. So you have x plus 8 in one bracket, and one of the x's is taken out separately, and that equals 0. And then you have a choice then of x equals 0 or x plus 8 equals 0. The first one is basically done for you, which is x is 0. The next one, this one here, I need to take away 8 from both bits to get x equals minus 8. So those are our two answers. Sometimes people forget that x is 0 is an option. So this time doesn't actually equal 0 straight away. But what we can do is we can just take away this 36x, make it equal 0. So you have x squared minus 36x equals 0. And then we're kind of back at the same place we were in the last question. So you have x brackets x minus 36 equals 0. And then we have either x equals 0 or x minus 36 equals 0. Well, that's the first one done. X is 0, but the other one, we then have to add 36. You get x equals 36. Boom. Two answers, like most of them are. We could have something like x squared minus 16 equals 0. And in this case, we have sort of our x squared and our minus 16. There are a couple of ways to go about this. I often find it easier where we need to look at the factors of 16. It's 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. And this is actually what's called the difference of two squareds. But we need to get 0x overall, which means you have 4 and a minus 4 equals 0. So 4 minus 4 is 0x, because we have no x, we're not even going to bother writing it. What we then have is x plus 4 equals 0, or x minus 4 equals 0. That means that x equals minus 4, or x equals 4. So if they've got more than just one x squared at the front, we're going to use something called the quadratic formula. And so far, all these other ones have had just single x squared. So here there's just 1x squared, that's just normal 1x squared, 1x squared, and so on. They've all only had single x squared. But the quadratic formula works for how many x squared that you've got. So if I had 3x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0, and I need to find out what x is, I can use the quadratic formula. And this is x equals minus b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that's when ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I've written down the formula. We have this equation, and a is basically the number of x squared. So a in this case equals 3, b is the number of x's, which is 2, and c is the number of units, which is minus 8. And then really all we do now is plug in the values. So we have x equals minus b, which is minus 2, plus and minus the square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4 times 3 times minus 8, all over 2 times 3. We plug that in a calculator, and what we get is x equals 4/3 or minus 2. So that is our two answers, 1, 2, by use of the quadratic formula. So what about this next one? So this is basically the same. The quadratic formula is minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. A is the number of x squared, which is 2. B is the number of x's, which is minus 5. And c is the number of units, which is minus 12. So we have minus b, so minus 5, which we could just delete those minuses and have it as a plus. It's going to let me delete it. There we go. So we have plus and minus a square root of minus 5 squared minus 4 times 2, that's minus 12 all over 2 times 2. Now, if at this point we typed in a calculator, we would actually get the wrong values. And that's because we need to put a bracket around that -5. And it's very common for my students, because I do tutoring normally, to miss out those brackets initially, but you have to put these brackets in because the calculator follows BIDMath perfectly, and it then goes 5 squared, which is 25, and minuses it, which is wrong. So what you've got is -5 times -5 is +25. So without this bracket, it would give you the wrong answer. And the answer is either 4, so x equals 4, or -3/2. Here we have another question, where we have x equals the square root of 3x plus 10. Now, I don't particularly like this square root, but it isn't too bad because it covers the entirety of this sign, including plus 10. So what I can do to get rid of square roots is I can do the opposite of square rooting, which is to square. So I have x squared equals, in brackets, the square root of 3x plus 10 squared. Now, the square root symbol and the squaring cancel. So you just get x squared equals 3x plus 10. Now, to use our quadratic formula, which we're going to do in a moment, we need to make sure that it equals 0, and currently it doesn't. I tend to move everything onto the side with the most x's, or most x squareds. So here we have an x squared, and the other side we don't have any at all. So I'm going to minus 3x, and I'm going to minus a 10. So 3x minus 3x is nothing, and 10 minus 10 is also nothing. So we have x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Then we can use our quadratic formula, which is minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So then a is the number of x squared, which is 1. B is the number of x's, which is minus 3. And c is the number of units, which is minus 10. So we have minus b, so minus 3, or plus 3, plus or minus the square root of minus 3 in brackets squared, minus 4 times 1 times minus 10, all over 2 times 1. And you plug that into a calculator, and what you'll get is x is either 5 or minus 2. It also could have factorized, but I thought I'd go and do the quadratic formula to make sure we have our square roots with a negative, and making sure you put that in a bracket. So this question is a little bit different, where we have a 2x minus 3 in brackets squared first, and then that equals 100. And the very first thing we need to do is expand out that bracket. And we have 2x minus 3 multiplied by 2x minus 3. And I like to use the grid way to expand out these brackets. So we have 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3, 2x times 2x is 4x squared, 2x times minus 3 is minus 6x, 2x times minus 3 is another minus 6x, and then we have minus 3 times minus 3 is 9. So what we have is you have 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 100. So all we've done first of all is expand out that bracket. Now to use the quadratic formula, we need to make it equal to 0. So we have 4x squared minus 12x. And then what we need to do with our numbers, we need to take away that 100. So you minus 100 from both sides, and you get minus 91 equals 0. And then you can use the quadratic formula, where a equals 4, b equals minus 12, and c equals minus 91. So x equals minus b, so it's minus 12, or just normal 12, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is minus 12, but in brackets squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times minus 91 all over 2 times 4. So we type that in a calculator and you get x equals 6.5 or x equals minus 3.5. So that's our two answers for that wonderful equation. So now we've gone through a few examples. Why don't you have a go at a few? So this is covering exercise 2a and 2b. So the questions are on screen now. And have a go. So first of all, they're trying to get you to factorise in 2a. I don't normally bother too much with the 3x squared types and factorising those, because I just use the quadratic formula, and you get a calculator for all your exams, so you might as well use it. For 2b, you make sure you end up rearranging them so that they equal 0. So hopefully at some point you've also paused and you've had a go. And the answers are coming up just now. So the answers now on screen. Pause the video, mark them, make sure you get them all correct. And you now understand, hopefully, quadratic formula a bit better. So all it really is make sure it equals 0, and then plug in the numbers for a is the number of x squared, b is the number of x's, and c is the number of units. And make sure there's a negative for b, so you put that in brackets for the squared bit. So I hope to see you in the next video, where we'll look at a bit more quadratics and something called computing the square.